So we met one other time, and it was through Zoom. So when I saw him come in, I'm like, hey, it's nice to actually meet you in person. But some of you were there for our parent webinar for parenting through the pandemic. And Brandon came in and shared amazing information with us. And I wanted to invite him back because I know he has a lot of wisdom in this area.
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Yeah, you guys can be the judge of that. But after hearing Michelle's testimony, I want to let you kind of speak, and maybe as you were sitting there listening, what were some thoughts that were going through your head as you were hearing her story? What were some areas that maybe you can see parents jumping into her situation, kind of helping and guiding her in that?
Okay, so let me start with something that I really liked that you're saying, that she's saying, and that's that it's not the talk. If you think you're going to go have the talk, please don't have the talk. You're not ready to have the talk. Just be quiet. Okay? It is breadcrumbs that you are placing. Hopefully, you've already started. If you haven't, you're not a bad parent. You're probably just a scared parent. But be patient and look for opportunities. You don't just go to the breadcrumbs because you stayed up at night going, oh my gosh, I'm scared because I saw this movie and I heard this talk, or, you know, I think this thing's happened. You wait for the opportunities that make sense. When parents come at their kids out of the blue and it's just a parenting moment, what do you think happens? Everything shuts off. They're not, whatever you're saying isn't going. In fact, you might actually be pushing them more. So I love that piece, so that you guys are already pushing that out. A thought that I had is she said something that I like, and that's the age-appropriate conversations. I like it, but I'm also going to add on to it. It's not really age-appropriate. It's age-appropriate and exposure-appropriate, because if we just go by ages right now, every community is different. Every child is different. I am blown away at things that some older teens I'm working with have not been exposed to sometimes. And then I'm blown away at what some really young kids I work with have been exposed to. And so in that, don't assume, okay? I know a lot of our kids are being exposed to a lot, but not everybody's being exposed. And I know that there's this idea about what's age appropriate and when and how, and just get really good at reading cues. And if you're not good at reading cues, ask for help. And that's what's cool about like the village idea and being a part of a church that's willing to have this conversation is you can kind of run it by somebody that can give you some feedback. But waiting, okay, I don't mean waiting years or months. Waiting is always a good idea, okay? That really like intense feeling you have to have the conversation now doesn't need to be followed through with tonight. It can be next week. It can be after you kind of sit down with a mentor or somebody that can run things. Does that make sense? Yes.
I know you mentioned working with students. Do you want to elaborate on what that means for the parents who don't already know you or were introduced to you?
Yes. Well, I'm a therapist, and I run a teen center called Inspired Resolution in Belinda. And so most of us, all except one of our therapists, we are Christians. We work with a lot of people from the churches, including your church. And so every therapist that works for me has to be really good at working with teens, otherwise they're not a part of my team.
Awesome. Did I cut you off?
No, I don't think, if you did, I forgot.
Yeah, it must not be.
No, it must not have been.
So, I like what you said, building on the village, and just kind of, it takes your community. We have a pretty wide range of families here. So what I want you to do is explain to these parents what are the effects, positive effects of having conversations with your students, just in general, not related to sexuality, but just in general of having some sort of a line of communication.
It depends on who you are and how you're having that conversation, to be honest. I don't know any of you, okay? So I'm not speaking to you. Don't think that some of you sitting here are really rigid and difficult to have conversations with, and you know what? You think you're having a lot of good conversation with your kids, and they're tuning you out, and they're not actually speaking with you. Some of you are really like that I'm a best friend type of parent, and you know what? You're having some great conversations, but you're not getting anywhere because they're leading you, you're not leading them. And then there's some of you who are that balance. And so I don't know that you should, oh man, I hate saying this to parents. I don't know that you should start having conversations yet. Do a gut check first. Take a look at how you relate to your kids. I teach parents, a couple of you at least know this, I teach parents this rule. It's called the 90-10 rule. Who knows what that is? Okay, so the 90-10 rule for me is you spend 90% of your time just in relationship, like surface stuff with your kids, and only 10% of the time in hard parenting stuff. Okay? And that's hard for parents. So if you're that parent that is constantly having those hard parenting stuff, we got to talk about sex, we got to talk about drugs, we got to talk about your grades. You know what? I don't want you going out tonight and having a conversation. I want you to chill.
Sorry, we don't have any wine in the back. I'm sorry.
And then I want you to start relating to your child, more often in that 90%. And really just remember that you only get a few moments throughout the week to have a hard conversation with your child. Now, we talked a lot about having conversation with your child. What about what you model in the conversations you have around your child? How you speak, how your friends speak, the conversations you're having when you do have that wine party. What is it that your kids witness on a daily basis? That's actually more important than the conversation you have directly with them, because all of that builds up to how that conversation goes when you have a physical conversation. Okay. Anybody like a yeller here when your kids aren't doing the right thing? Okay.
We can be honest as church.
If you're a yeller, the first thing I want you to do is go a month or two not yelling, not ever, not for anything, before you have this really important conversation. Now here's the thing. When you have a conversation about things like sex, things like relationships, I want it to be effective. I'd rather you have it once and it be impactful than have it every day and not make a difference. So some of you are ready right now to have some conversations periodically, and some of you need to change your demeanor and the way that you're interacting first so that you can have that conversation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I just, everything I teach to parents is totally in line with how Jesus walked in, and how he taught. We love to come at people hot and heavy, and I'm one of those people. But that's not the impression I get from the Bible and how things were taught. And so think about it. Is your spirit in line with Jesus' spirit and teaching before you have that conversation? Not just the sex conversations, all the difficult conversations with your child.
I love that you mentioned that you look at the demeanor of Jesus and how he lived life. Oftentimes, he surrounded himself with complete idiots, and they messed up constantly. And there were a lot of big moments where Jesus could have had those yelling, reminding of how bad of a sinner that person is, but instead he chose to love them. And that's how I work as a youth pastor. I tend to do that same 90-10, where I try my best to really get to know students just for who they are, and that may sometimes just stick at a surface level place. But then I'm surprised when they come back next week and they just open about something they never even told their parents.
Yeah.
And they're willing to trust somebody who just got to know them for a couple of months or even upon a couple of years. And I've definitely witnessed that with some of your students, and it's been such a blessing. But I totally agree with that letting somebody know that you love them no matter what, first, that helps them have that trust where they're willing to more likely come to you with something they're struggling with, or more likely to listen to you when you're trying to have a parenting or even a teaching moment. Is that something you've seen?
As a parent, and I'm a parent, as a parent, we want to protect and set our child up for success. And as a Christian, we want them to enter the kingdom of heaven, and that's like our goal. And And I get that, and I have those feelings, and I have those thoughts, but oddly enough, none of us parents sitting here, our job is not to keep our kids from making a mistake. Our job is to give them resources. Our job is to model and walk alongside them. Our job is to introduce them to Jesus so that God can take the reins. And something before you get into how much to guide, we all got to guide them. Don't get me wrong, we've got to set boundaries. I'm not saying just back up, God's got it. But we've got to remember that it isn't our job to make sure that they're okay, even though I feel like it is. It's our job to live our journey. It's our job to introduce. It's our job to evangelize to our own children and to model for them. It's our job to give them the resources to make the right decisions and put the relationship first when they don't make the right decisions. Okay? And not feel guilty or not feel like you failed just because they're making poor decisions. Some of you are going to model in a great way. Some of you are going to have perfect sex thoughts, and your kids are still going to make mistakes or make poor decisions. And you're going to want to be angry, and you're going to want to change everything right there. But we're called to turn those moments over to God. We're called to walk alongside our children, even though they're making mistakes. And remember, your journey on this earth is not the same as their journey on this earth. Your relationship with God is not their relationship with God. And here's what's hard. You guys all have to accept this so you can have the ultimate relationship with God. You can't guarantee anything for your children. You just can't. And if you go in thinking it's your job to guarantee something, you're gonna flood it. Conversations aren't gonna go well. If you go in knowing I'm here to be a model, I'm here to be responsible for my own walk, and love on this child no matter what, you're going to have your heart in the right place to have all these conversations. Does that make sense? Before you begin, I want to get to this. I wrote a few things down. Before you begin to have the conversation, number one, any conversation, any difficult conversation, whether it's about sex, a movie they just saw, something else, relationship, first ask yourself, what is the goal of this conversation? And if you don't know what the goal is, keep your mouth shut. Wait until you do. Okay? The other is do more listening than talking. You guys have a lot of information. I know you want to give it to your kids, but they can handle like one, maybe two pieces of information, and the rest needs to be them talking to you. Even though you're boiling up inside, you're like, but I have so much I need to tell them. Stop it. I get it. Look, you've got literally an entire childhood and early adult life if you maintain that relationship to pass on bits of information. Don't overwhelm them. Don't tell them everything all at once. And then ask yourself the vibe going on. If the vibe's not good, if your mood's not good, if the vibe's not good in the home or with them, you gotta wait, you gotta be patient. You gotta let God place an opportunity in front of you. Okay? You don't get to create the opportunities. Remember what you control and what you don't control. You don't control their walk. Sorry. You don't control them. You get to influence them. And I've got some disappointing news. Okay? My goal with all parents I work with is that I help you optimize your influence in their life. But the bummer is you at most have an 11% influence over their life by the time they're teens. Once your child's a teen, you only have 11% influence over them, no more than that. You get to optimize 11% influence over them. And I know some of you are going, yeah, but you don't know me. Yes, I've worked with badder, tougher parents than you. I do know you, and you still at most have 11%. That means if you're a yeller, that means if you're somebody who keeps having the conversations over and over again, I call those insane conversations, guess what? If you're the one that's repelling them, making them shut off, you're not optimizing that 11%. You have like 0% influence. And so as a parent, our job is to figure out how to optimize our influence, not be their only influence. As scary as that is, she listed off all these influences going on in the world. I know. I've got a 2.5-year-old, guys. I don't sleep at night. Thank God I got a house with a pool, because I I swim laps at like 11 at night thinking about this stuff sometimes. Okay. Remind yourself to put the relationship first. I know I already said that, but I'm going to say it again. Put the relationship first, please. Okay. Not your wisdom. And remember that you're there to guide, introduce, not determine their faith. Okay. Any thoughts?
Can you go into detail of that? Because I really like that point.
The last one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Our job as a parent is simply to guide. God only calls us to guide, to set up some boundaries for our kids to walk in. Now, most of us, like me, I've got a 2.5-year-old, so it's easier right now, right? I get to guide her like this, like I literally can physically pick her up and point her in any direction that I want, and that's going away because she's starting to flail. But by the time our children are teens, guess what? We can only set boundaries like this because if we put them like this, what do? They break out of it. So we're there to guide with some boundaries. We're there to be in relationship with them. We're there to walk alongside them, not walk for them. Right? We don't get to be Jesus. Right? We don't get to be the only footprint in the sand, so to speak. Only Jesus gets to do that. We have to walk alongside them. Not ahead of them, not behind them, alongside them by the time they are teens. And that's hard for parents to accept.
It's hard for me as a pastor to accept too, because the one downside to really knowing students is like their poor decision making as well, and I just have a heart for the kids that I pastor, and I get a glimpse of what you all deal with when you're at home and you hear the full story and you're dealing with it more than just an hour and a half that I am. But there are times that I'm sitting there and like, if I could have only given that sermon better. If I could have only spent more time at coffee talking about who to stay away from and why not to go down that path. And then I have to remind myself of what you just said, that I'm not Jesus. That I could have a killer sermon, I could have everything in youth group to set them up to make all the perfect decisions that God wants them to. But at the end of the day, I have to release control to Him. Yeah. And I think that's something that we all commonly share in this room, is learning to set up those appropriate boundaries and trying your best to set them up for success, and then having to step away and say, okay, God, I'm going to trust you to guide them. I'm going to trust you to get them where you want them to be, even in the worst decision-making processes that they might have.
And, the message is important, and Michelle's testimony is important, and that is going to change people's lives when they hear it. But there's a piece that I think, especially us as Christians, don't actually focus on very much. And if you're taking notes, if you're not just remember this piece, what I'm saying right now is going to be one of the most important things I say tonight. It's going to be one of the most important tools you get tonight. As a Christian parent in this world right now, trying to pass along and raise our children with Christian morals and values, we can give all the messages in the world, we can say it over and over again, we can give the perfect speech, give the perfect sermon, and none of it will matter unless we are the happiest people that our children know. And one of the biggest mistakes I see in families is you go to church, parents will go to church, they will go to work, they will preach, go to school, don't have sex, don't do drugs. And then the parents are snipping with each other, not loving, and then they're getting on the kids all the time, and going to church Sunday isn't a happy event, it's a come on guys, let's get in the door, what are you guys doing event. And you know what? I think as Christians, if we're going to walk the walk and talk the talk, we've also got to show what an awesome life it is. How happy we can be. And you don't do that by yelling and insisting that they hear your message. You don't show how happy you are by getting frustrated because they're not walking the walk how you want them to walk the walk during the season. Remember, they are in a season that is just starting out. They have literally millions of seasons that they're going to go through before they die. And you're looking for proof in their season right now. Well, hey, God's got the answers. God knows where this season's going to lead and where that season's going to lead. So if you can just remember that they're in a season and they don't need to be happy. You do them. You have an obligation as you're talking about sex and difficult things to model what you preach, but also show how happy you can be. And I think we miss that often.
Yeah, it's awesome. So I have a dog. I'm married and I have a dog. So I'm glad my dog is as smart as a human, because I'm sure we'll learn some bad habits already too. Between sometimes the way my wife and I treat each other. But I love that how you want us to put on to display. One of my favorite pastors I listen to, he always says that sometimes what Christians do is they have this really awesome message, but then they're like always frowning, they're always upset, and they always just walk around as if it's not a true message. And if we truly believe that Jesus Christ died, went to the grave for 3 days, and resurrected, and if we believe in him, we have that same outcome, we should be the happiest people on this planet, because we have the ultimate news, we have the ultimate eternity.